Greetings from Donbas. For the past few months, I've been reading the most famous Telegram channels of Ukrainian National Socialists, and in this video, I'm going to tell you what I saw there and explain their mindset. Let's start with the most relevant topic today, the Ukrainian war. Among them, there is a consensus that we are rapidly approaching a crushing defeat, which is why Ukraine needs peace as soon as possible, at any cost. But the most interesting part is exactly how they plan to end the war under conditions where the other side is not interested in its conclusion and is firmly intent on fighting further. The main idea of the Ukrainian far right is that, for the sake of peace, we must surrender Donbas to the Russians. The logic here is roughly this: people are more important than territories, and if Ukraine preserves its population, then, over time, it will be able to wait for the right moment and take revenge. But if we keep fighting with the current dynamics of losses, we will end up with neither the population nor the lands. Of course, such a plan is subject to devastating criticism from almost all sectors of Ukrainian society, but the far right has counter-arguments for almost every remark. When someone says that surrendering territories without a fight will create a dangerous precedent for the future, they reply that we have already surrendered nearly 20% of our lands almost without a fight in the first days of the war, so the precedent has existed for a long time already. When people say that the remains of Donbas can be defended for several more years, they claim that we don't have the people for this, and even the best fortifications won't protect themselves if there are no defenders in them. When someone notes that society will never in its life accept such a scenario, they suggest holding a referendum, and everyone who votes against the surrender should be immediately mobilized into the army, regardless of their age. They have counter-arguments for almost every occasion. To summarize the opinion of the Ukrainian far right, it would look something like this. At the beginning of the war, we had a chance to defeat the Russians because our army was innovative, proactive, and had high morale. But over 4 years of war, our armed forces had degraded into the state of a small red army, losing almost all of its strengths and adopting a bunch of bad aspects. And it's impossible to defeat a big red army with a small red army. Moreover, in their vision of the future, there is an interesting plot twist. They believe that after the end of hostilities in Ukraine, the Russians will try to attack one of the Baltic countries, and then Europe will have to fully commit to the fight for us. Now, I'll share a bit of my own opinion on all this. Their hope for a war between Russia and NATO reminds me of the sentiments that prevailed in the Ukrainian insurgent army at the end of the Second World War. They also believed that sooner or later the Allies would start a war against the USSR, and then Ukraine would have a chance to win its independence. But history turned out quite differently. And as for the main idea of the Ukrainian far right, that to end the war we must surrender Donbas, I have one massive observation, for which they have no answer. Where is the guarantee that after surrendering of Donbas, the Russians will stop? Ukrainian patriots should know our history well. They should understand that Moscow has always violated all possible agreements as soon as a convenient opportunity arose. Agreements with the Russians are not worth the paper they are written on. The Donbas issue is not a choice between war and peace as useful fools in the West try to present it. It's a choice between a war on more or less favorable lines and a meat grinder where we won't have any normal defensive structures. That's why I'm a pessimist regarding whether the war will end in the near future. I see no prerequisites for that. From the war, let's move to the closely related issue of mobilization. Ukrainian National Socialists are against mobilization in the form it's currently being carried out. They say its main goal now is not the defense of the country, but the unlimited enrichment of corrupt officials and everyone involved in evading military service. Also, they have a fairly strong argument that due to mobilization and closed borders, men in Ukraine live worse and have fewer rights than people in the occupied territories. Here, they are only right regarding the lands newly occupied in the 2022. The Russians are afraid to mobilize the population because they believe their brains haven't been sufficiently washed yet. Most men in Donetsk were mobilized and killed in assaults during the first year of the Great War. The far right believes that Ukraine's mobilization potential is already exhausted and that the forced conscription of men into the army only delays the inevitable defeat. I even saw this comparison somewhere. If you put twice as many fishermen by a dried-up pond, the amount of fish caught won't increase. Lately, there have been cases in Ukraine of mobilizing a child's sole guardian, after which the child is sent to an orphanage. The far right fiercely criticizes such practices, emphasizing that judges should follow the spirit of the law first, it only then its letter. But after all this, the question arises: how do they propose to hold the 2,000-kilometer front line without mobilized reinforcements? Their main proposal here is a robotic army. They love videos where a Ukrainian ground drone performs infantry work, taking out occupiers with a machine gun. My opinion on mobilization is this: currently, Ukraine has found itself hostage to a corrupt conscription system. Corruption in the military is so deeply rooted that attempts to eradicate it would lead to a total collapse of mobilization, leaving the front without reinforcements and endangering the preservation of statehood itself. The officials involved in draft dodging are effectively blackmailing the state, implying that if anyone tries to cut off the flow of corrupt rent, they will trigger a crushing defeat in the war. They are essentially turning into a higher caste, against which the law and courts are powerless. Honestly, I have no idea on how to fight this. The situation is too far gone. The only thing I can say for sure is that the far-right's idea of a robotic army is a bit ahead of its time. Scientific progress is not yet at the stage where robots can fully assault or defend something. I'm all for using ground drones for logistics, reconnaissance, and occasional target engagement. But I understand that they are not omnipotent, and it will be a long time before the army learns to live without infantrymen at all. From such complex topics as war and mobilization, I suggest moving to something simpler, namely the far-right's attitude towards national minorities. Let's start with the Crimean Tatars. They are Turkic-speaking Muslim people living in Crimea in the south, numbering several 100,000 people. The vast majority of them are currently under occupation. National Socialists accuse the Tatars of being loyal to the occupation and call for strict assimilation in the event the peninsula is liberated. Also, they want to strip Crimea of any autonomy and turn it into a regular oblast, just like all the neighboring territorial units. They are against returning Crimean toponyms to their historical Turkic names. But of course, the most strained relations the far right has are with Jews. They are accused of orchestrating the artificial famine that claimed the lives of several million Ukrainians 100 years ago. The logic here is as follows. The early USSR was a Judo-Bolshevik state where Jews used artificial famine to suppress the independence-seeking sentiments of national peripheries and centralize all power in Moscow. Recently, they gained another strong argument when anti-corruption bodies uncovered a massive criminal organization headed by a Jew close to Zelensky. This hostility sometimes takes completely unexpected forms. For instance, some National Socialists openly support Iran in its war against Israel, despite the fact that the Iranian regime supplies our enemies with lethal kamikaze drones. Regarding their stance on migration, there are no surprises here. The far right is against any non-white migration. They hope that foreigners will use our country only as a springboard to move to Western Europe and won't stay here. Recently, they organized the bullying against an organization that helped Indians obtain visas to work in Ukraine. In conclusion, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that even during a horrific war for the survival of the nation, we still have a living opposition that openly hates Zelensky and harshly criticizes the state's course. Pluralism of opinion is preserved even in the most unfavorable times for the country. No one throws critics of the government into prison or tries to kill them. This gives me personally hope that it will never be possible to turn Ukraine into an obedient concentration camp, and that after decades of cruel trials, a bright future still awaits us.